Welcome back to another episode of the Hall of Sports podcast. Today I'm joined by Paul Brown. He, as you can see with his background, has his own Cleveland Browns podcast. So that's what we're here to talk about this week, especially after the exciting game yesterday between the Browns and the Bengals. So there's lots to talk about, especially with Odell Beckham kind of going out. So before we get into that, where can everybody find you, Paul?
Oh, I would say the best place to find me at the moment is Instagram, Paul Brown _UK, and add me on Twitter and TikTok too.
Yeah, if you want Cleveland Brown stuff or even some of the food stuff that you've been doing, it's a good way to follow you there, especially on Instagram. I was having a look at that today and some nice stuff to even get ready for when you're watching a big game just beforehand. Get some good grub before you sit down and watch whatever it is. If you're watching Red Zone, 7 hours of football every Sunday, or if you're like me and you're kind of staying up late to watch it, the Monday night football game between the Rams and the Bears. But again, it's always good to give you a follow, and then especially if you're a fan of the Browns, is just listen up, because again, you've a pretty big follow in terms of for the UK. I see a lot of the stuff coming around social media, so it's all good. So I guess what we'll start up in is just kind of the start of the season that Cleveland has had, because it's interesting because a lot of people were talking about the Bengals with kind of Joe Burrow coming through, and Cleveland were able to beat them twice, both games pretty close, but especially in this last game, it was very, very entertaining, especially for a neutral, seeing all these comebacks, one from the other. I think a lot of people thought that maybe the Bengals may have had it just towards the end when Joe Burrow kind of came back in the fourth quarter, but then Baker and the offense kind of did what they needed to do for Cleveland to get through that. So how did you feel during that fourth quarter of the game yesterday?
Yeah, it was the total NFL fans roller coaster. The first half, half time, Baker Mayfield, he was out of Cleveland, according to Brown's Twitter. There was complete meltdown. I was having a meltdown. Interception, first play from Baker Mayfield, same against the Steelers. But I backed him, and that's easy to say afterwards. But yeah, genuinely, I'll always back a guy. He's got until end of next season, and then it's either give him a contract or not. So he's still got one more season to be a bust, a bit like your boy Mitch. So
I think.
But yeah, it's absolutely buzzing yesterday. 40 seconds, we came back and win it. And the biggest thing is for me, that is so not Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
That's what made it so great. 2016, we had the Christmas block kick, that made everyone's Christmas. Probably Baker Mayfield, when he came off the bench against the Jets, was also another huge game. We hadn't won in 635 days, and then Baker Mayfield comes off at halftime and wins it. So it's up there for the last 5-10 years of great victories. 40 seconds left, no timeouts. Took it all the way down the field. Boom. The wide receiver, Daniel People-Jones, that was his second only receiving ball from Baker Mayfield. So just absolutely in his NFL career. So yeah, it was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting points you make there is with Baker, how he has towards the end of the next season before you either chooses a contract extension or do you kind of move on. How is he seen amongst Browns fans? Because as a kind of outsider, especially with the Bears, because when I be listening to kind of sports talk radio in around Chicago, it's been such a divide between people who either love Mitch or hate him. And now I think everybody's kind of gotten on board that they needed somebody else to come in. But it always seemed like when we would talk about the Browns that it seemed like Baker was a good quarterback for them. But then when you listen to kind of Browns fans, there is that similar divide that I've seen with Mitch Trubisky. And then I can't remember, it was last week when someone put up the stats between Trubisky and Baker, and they look very, very similar. So to me, it's an interesting question. It's how is he actually seen amongst Browns fans?
I can answer that with a detailed stat for you, actually. 90% of Browns fans back Baker Mayfield.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll give you the exact numbers here. 90%, that's 1,200 Browns fans voted. There could be a few Steelers fans in there.
Yeah.
The numbers, but yeah. So yeah, 90% of the Browns fans are backing Baker Mayfield. A lot of people, 10% are saying he's not our franchise quarterback. At halftime, I think it was probably 60% backing Baker and 40% just saying, right, okay, let's get him out.
Yeah, do you think it might have been because, like you were saying, that first kind of season that I don't think everybody expected him to play from the off, but when he comes on, he wins a couple of the games for the Browns, and then you see the likes of Odell Beckham joining, and people thought that they would be kind of pushing to get into the playoffs, and then they'd end up with a 6-10 record. Do you think that might be one of the reasons why some fans or even opposition fans that don't pay too much attention to Cleveland, that they're not completely sold on Baker, that if with all the talent that Cleveland has had since really since Baker's been drafted, that you've seen an influx of talent come in, like the obvious one is with Odell Beckham, that maybe because it didn't make the playoffs, could that be a reason why there'd be a slight divide for some people when they think of Baker and kind of his future with the Cleveland Browns?
I don't think that, not really. I think our view is, as Browns fans, he's got to be protecting the ball a lot better. He can't give away silly interceptions. You hear Aaron Rodgers, and I still don't believe this stat's true. He's only given away 3 interceptions.
Yeah, and 2 of them
in
were
his whole career.
No, I don't think it's in his whole career. I think there was some crazy stat that it was like a couple years where he hadn't given away an interception. Then he gave away 2 last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Because I think early on in his career he did give away a good amount early on, but then I think over the last couple of years you haven't seen it. So far this season anyway, he's given away. It was just the 2 to Tampa Bay, but he is one of those quarterbacks that doesn't tend to give away a lot of interceptions. That the way kind of they play is that he's what I'd say he's safe with the ball. So when he knows it's not there, he's willing to just throw it away, and it's something that you don't see a lot of quarterbacks do. But he's insanely accurate. He's the one thing that when I listen to kind of sports radio, when they try and describe Aaron Rodgers, he was always the Green Bay Packers deodorant, that when the Packers were bad and you looked at their actual team on paper, that they shouldn't have done as well as they did, but Aaron Rodgers made them that much better. I think that's a problem that a lot of young quarterbacks have now, is that you have some of those players come into the league. You see it with Pat Mahomes now, as even if they were having a bad game, he's just that good to keep them in it and to kind of push them over the line. And it makes for a bit of unrealistic expectations on some quarterbacks. You probably will see it over the next couple of weeks with Joe Burrow, even though he's playing so well, that because the Bengals are losing, he'll get quite a lot of stick. Maybe not this year, but next year after they become rookies. I saw it with Trubisky. He kind of got a pass for the first kind of year and a bit, and then fans started to turn on him. And when you're thinking of when Rodgers came into the league, is quarterbacks got that time to develop, and not so many people would attack them so early on. But now, because of the likes of Pat Mahomes and all, and even when Andrew Luck came in, they've expected to just come in and hit the ground running. It's one thing that would worry me if I was a Clemson fan with Lawrence coming in next year. If he's going to the Jets, people are going to expect big things, and I don't think that's going to happen. Again, it's tough in the NFL. You've seen some players come in, even look at Jackson for the Baltimore Ravens. Nobody would have expected just how good he's been. early on, and that kind of leads to it where while the Browns have had a pretty good start to the season, so 5-2, I think most Browns fans would have taken that at this point in the season. But does it worry any fans that the two losses are to the Steelers and the Ravens, and there were big losses as well, where it doesn't really look like it was hugely competitive in those games?
Yeah, the Steelers game, more so. The Ravens game, first game of the season, new coach.
Yeah.
Let's just discount that one. I think we didn't get we did get smashed, but we didn't get like obliterated. Where the Steelers really hurt us, and at the start of the season, we felt that we were second. In that we are going to be second. Steelers fans thought they were going to be second. But yeah, I think today you can clearly see the gap, between Steelers and the Browns. They just are a complete team with a well-oiled, coached team. They know what they're doing. So the Steelers game hurt. We want revenge. It's the last game of the season for the Browns. After New Year, we are super keen to obviously bring them to First Energy Stadium and kick some ass, basically.
Yeah, no, it's important. I think I say it all the time because as a Bears fan right now, because we're very defensive orientated and probably have statistically one of the better defenses in the league. We always get branded as one of the worst 5-1 or when it was 4-0 teams out there. But right now, I think in the season that we have it's just you just have to keep winning games and get towards the end of the season and put yourself in the best position possible. And being 5-2, even in the tough division that you have with the extra playoff kind of or teams that are going to be in this season, it gives a division that is very tough a chance to have three teams that are in it, especially when you compare even some of the other teams. Like I've looked at some of the schedule that you have played so far. To be able to get a win against the Colts is no easy feat. We played against them and we couldn't even get into the game. Their defensive line was ferocious against our offensive line and our offense. So to be able to get over that, but then you look at it and the other thing that kind of steps out is the fact that other wins were against the Cowboys and Washington. And that's one area where I'd be a little bit concerned considering how low that division has been this year. You look at it and I think none of the teams in that division have won more than 3 games thus far. But again, you can only win or beat the teams that are on your schedule. Do you think that having that extended playoff really gives fans in kind of some of these bigger divisions where you're seeing kind of 3 teams play very well thus far a genuine chance to make the playoffs and make kind of a run in the playoffs?
I think the key thing is Browns are sitting 5-2.
Yeah.
And we've seen before teams with 8, 9, so we need 4 wins basically from 9 games. And when you put that into practice, I think, we are definitely going to back ourselves,
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, the one thing that kind of impressed me is as I was watching the game yesterday was to a certain extent parts of the defense. So you look at Myles Garrett, who's had a tremendous start to the season. I was even looking because when they were talking about him, they're saying how good of a season he had, and you would see him every weekend. I don't think people quite realize that he's almost in double-digit sacks already, which is crazy considering you see some of the other kind of big-time players that haven't got close to that yet. The one thing that I looked at is, can the Browns defense be balanced enough to kind of get them through that kind of playoffs? Because the one thing that you'll always see, and you even saw it with some of the teams last season, is that your offense will get you into the playoffs a lot of the time, but then the defense tends to win you playoff games because you see it even when the Ravens play in the playoffs the last 2 seasons. They haven't been as explosive as they were before. I think the only team that it's very hard to stop is you probably look at Kansas City right now. But even looking at some of the defensive numbers there, um, the one thing you look at, I think the passing. I was looking at the passing yards that they ranked 30th in the NFL, but then when you look at rushing yards given against, it's fifth. So it's one side of it where you're seeing that not a lot of teams have been able to run on Cleveland, but then they're having a lot of success in the passing game. In order to kind of move forward, and if the Browns are able to get into the playoffs, what do you think they need to do to try and kind of limit the amount of passing yards that they've been kind of conceding over the past couple of weeks?
Well, the trade deadline is next week. We're extremely light on our safeties. Yeah, I think one linebacker, one secondary, or one cornerback and one safety, we're away from a winning potential playoff team. But the truth of the matter is, we're not doing it against the Ravens and the Steelers at the moment. We're going to get smashed in the playoffs. So
So in that case, if you don't believe that you're as good as them, is it would it be a good plan for Cleveland to actually go out and be aggressive in for the trade deadline, or is it best to just kind of sit with the team you have now, maintain the assets that you have, and just kind of build on this season for next year?
yeah, I personally think we go all in. But there's a lot of people that would probably be a bit more cautious, because play play your rookies, your undrafted free agents. They get experience this year and have a final push next year. But yeah, if you bring in the big free agents in, then them rookie players don't get the game time. So next year you're on your back foot and you've eaten up some of your cap space.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's a lot of teams that I feel like are probably going through the same dilemma. I have it as a Bears fan that the fact that we're 5-1 right now, have a game this evening, and then we're very light on our offensive line. And you look at a team that if they end up beating the Rams, going 6-1, do you go and invest at the trade deadline to kind of push yourself up there? And because I guess the scenarios are a little bit different, because if they went 6-1, they're in a genuine chance to kind of get a first round bye if they can continue going. But it's one of those that, do you kind of maintain kind of some of those assets going forward? Is it kind of a good time to kind of go all in? You see some teams do it, and then when you don't win, is it really worth it? It's really only worth it for the team that ends up winning the Super Bowl, because especially because most players that get traded at this time are usually on the last year of their contract as well. You don't see too many kind of big stars get traded, especially in the NFL. We've seen it in most other sports, and in recent times, I think they've said with some of the younger GMs that we've seen more activity at the trade deadlines. But again, I don't know how successful that's been over the past couple of seasons. Now, I guess one of the other concerns that I've seen some people talk about is now with Odell Beckham with his getting the ACL injury. Should the Browns be looking at wide receivers, or should they be happy enough with Jarvis Landry and Peoples-Jones?
Yeah, so really interesting. We've got our number one tight end out, Hooper.
Yeah.
We've got our number one running back, Chubb, out. We have got a great number two running back with Hunt. He can take all the snaps anyway all season, so it doesn't really matter. We've got Odell Beckham out, and we've got our second round pick, Delpit, out, who's a safety. We are light with big names injuries, but I think every NFL team has a similar amount of stars out at the moment. So I don't think we're unlucky, but it's just the way it is. We've got three wide receivers that are comfortable catching the ball, which would be Landry. We've got Higgins, It was a 5th round pick in 2016, I think. He's got a great relationship with Baker Mayfield. Didn't see him a lot last season. Didn't see him at the start of the season, but made some great plays. And Donovan Jones, whatever he's called, he was a 6th round pick from Michigan. Obviously, being in Ohio, some of the Browns fans weren't very happy with the pick, but he's a big wide receiver. Had lots of ace 5-star high school wide receiver, was going to be a 1st-round draft pick. That's where he was. Everyone had really high hopes for this guy, and we picked him up in the 6th round, which was a great pick for us. We all thought so anyway. So, yeah, it would be really, we've got three. We've got a guy called Hodge, who's more of a special teams player, coming off IR this week. Perryman was with the Browns, who did really, really well. He signed for a $4 million deal with the Browns on the same day as Odell comes. He cancelled the contract saying that Odell came. He's at the Jets at the moment. He's been linked with the Browns. But I think we will stick with what we've got and try and play out the season.
Yeah, it probably makes sense. Again, it's not like you're devoid of talent at the position. You even look at it yesterday that even without, when Odell went down, you're still able to put up a good amount of points and also be able to come back from a difficult situation. Like you're saying, there was only about 40, 45 seconds left and Baker's still able to get it done. And that game was very interesting because it shows just how difficult that division's going to be going forward. You look at it, doesn't look like the Steelers or the Ravens are going to be getting worse anytime soon. You see the Bengals have improved with Joe Burrow. Now they still have a lot to kind of improve on. And then you look at Cleveland, that you've seen them kind of improve step by step over the last couple of seasons. How difficult do you think that division's going to be over the next kind of 3 to 4 years to be able to win it? And really, it's when you look at kind of the different divisions, it looks like it's really the winner of kind of when the Chiefs will obviously kind of be one of the favorites in the AFC, but you can't really look past the Browns division there to be another kind of one of the teams to kind of be battling for the AFC as well.
Yeah, you got to look at the Bengals, and they've got, would you say, a top 5 wide receiving trio? They got some, good.
Yeah, look, you look at as I think as long as they can keep AJ Green over a long period of time, I think when you have a number one wide receiver, you really just need kind of complementary players. I think they brought in one of the rookies, T. Higgins, as well. That's been very good too, and I think he scored at the weekend as well for them, and that's always good when you have a new quarterback and new wide receiver coming in the same draft class. Because
when you look at their Boyd, look at their weapons. It ain't that bad for Burrow, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, O-line.
You can't fix everything in one season, and I guess if Burrow's the option for them, if you're able, as I think a lot of teams now, is once you're able to fix that quarterback position, it's easier to start building around that because you know where your future is going forward. And you'd see it with the Browns is that the amount of times that they've had high picks and they've picked quarterbacks and you've known pretty early on that this isn't the option and it needs to be done. At least now with Baker, like you're saying, there's still a large majority of Browns fans that are completely behind him and believe that you build around that quarterback, which again, he has the next year or so to kind of prove to everybody that he's the guy. From the outside looking in, I think most people think that he's a good quarterback. It's a lot of people when they think about the Browns, they just don't think that they're kind of the well-balanced team, which you can see with when you just kind of compare kind of the passing to the rushing, even on offense as well. You've seen it that the one thing that you look at is kind of the rushing yards for the Browns. I think they're top 5 in the NFL right now. That always helps a quarterback is when your running game is going well. So for me, I see it as one of those divisions that looking for the next kind of 2 to 3 seasons is going to be a very difficult one to win. It's the Steelers and the Ravens up there are very, very competitive. I think that'll be a very interesting battle this season as well, kind of moving in. But like you said, injuries is a big thing. You look at some teams, like I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, San Francisco were riddled with injuries and ended up, I think it was 3-13 or 4-12. The season after that, they don't get many injuries and they get to the Super Bowl. So sometimes it is just the team that can have most of their key players be healthy tend to do very well. As a Bears fan, 2 years ago we didn't have many injuries and we ended up going, I think it was 12-4, 13-3, and then the following season we lose a lot of our key players on defense and end up going 8-8. So it's one of those that there's not a huge difference between a lot of teams in the NFL, but injuries has a big part to play in who really makes the playoffs as well.
Let me ask you a question. Do you see Baker Mayfield as a top 10 quarterback?
I would say top 15. I think he's between kind of 10 to 13 for me. It's difficult because you have the likes of Rodgers, even Breeze to a certain extent. The way I don't really like Roethlisberger that much, but he gets it done for Pittsburgh. Obviously, you've Pat Mahomes, Deshaun Watson's excellent still. But I think from before you could easily rattle off 10 to 12 names that you'd be looking at. You have to look at how I think Teddy Bridgewater has been pretty good this season. I think for me, Baker, he's kind of hot and cold a lot of the time. Sometimes you watch him and he looks amazing, and then you turn on a game like against the Steelers and he looked a little bit lost. And really, to be a top kind of 10 quarterback, I think you need to be pretty consistent. But there's no reason. I think the difference between him and a lot of other kind of young quarterbacks is you can see that progression where he could become a top 10 quarterback. And if he can do that, then I think the Browns are on to kind of a winning thing, and that's all they need to do. Sometimes you have to build around them. As a Browns fan, how well do you think their offensive line has been built over the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, I think our own line looks great. It's expensive. That's the problem. So yes.
But that's the thing. If you have a good quarterback, for me, if you have a good quarterback and then you're good on your O line and D line, I think you're always going to have a chance to win football games, because that's really where a lot of the games are won and lost. It's not so much the skill positions to a certain extent. You see the likes of Aaron Rodgers, he only has Devontae Adams and he's still lighting up teams. But then I guess the problem is you come up against a good team, and you see it with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against Green Bay last week, and tough game for Green Bay and they got obliterated. You saw kind of similar happen last season when they played against the 49ers twice. The Packers looked great all season and they played them twice and got destroyed twice. So it goes to kind of those kind of key points is if you're relatively injury free, if you've a good defense or a good D line, good O line, and then if your quarterback is really in the NFL now, if you have an average quarterback but you have a very good defensive line, even a very good defense, you have a very good chance of winning it. But the problem is, I think the standards have now been kind of set by the likes of Pat Mahomes over the last kind of season, where you can try and keep him off the field as much as you can, but even a 20-point lead in a fourth or third quarter is still hard to overcome the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think they're going to be the ones to beat over the next couple of seasons.
Here's a question for you. My last question for you is, do you think if you took Patrick Mahomes, do you think he would work in the Bears scheme? And yeah, I'll answer the question for the Browns afterwards.
Yeah, I think he would work in the Bears scheme. The only thing is, I don't think the Bears' protection is as good as Kansas City. If we had good protection, I don't think there'd be an issue, because you look at it and Allen Robinson's been excellent this season already. I think he's already gone over 1,000 yards for receiving wise. Um, we've I don't know how, but it seems like Jimmy Graham has kind of woken up over the last couple of seasons. I think he has like 4 or 5 touchdowns already. Our biggest issue has been our offensive line because they've been really, and I feel sorry for David Montgomery at the running back position because every time he touches the ball, there's already a player in the backfield trying to tackle him. And if our offensive line was better, I think you would see better offensive production. But I think for Patrick Mahomes, he got put in the perfect kind of spot at the time. Gets to learn behind Alex Smith for a year, and then gets to play under Andy Reid with a good offense and a relatively good defense. What about? Do you think that he would suit the Cleveland Browns if they had drafted him that year?
It's $1 million question, isn't it? We could have had Lamar, we could have had Mahomes.
Yeah. How do people react there? Because obviously the pick that Cleveland made was excellent with Myles Garrett because he was brilliant. Would people still complain if, let's say, Mahomes went 2 and it was closer? Because I think at that season there was a lot of people that didn't think the offense he was in at Texas Tech was going to translate to the NFL. So people were even not sure that. So it's tough.
There was no one saying that anyone said that there was nothing else but Myles Garrett. So
yeah,
there was some, because Mitch is a Toledo boy, so that there was people saying trade down, pick him up. He's our franchise quarterback. We were saying all this. So
yeah, I remember that where I think it was some people saying, because I think you still had 2 more picks in that round that you were to trade back up to go and get him. I can't remember if it was 2 or just another top 10 pick that you had to kind of go back up in for him. Because I remember in the NFL Network, they're all talking about how he's a Cleveland, or he's kind of in that area. He's played in Cleveland in, I think it was high school. And should they go back in for him? Probably now as a Bears fan, I would have wished that you did. But maybe we would have drafted Mahomes or Watson instead. But again, I think it's revisionist history. Every time I think I talk about Mitch, it always comes back to kind of the misses that you made. But again, you don't know if those players would have thrived in your particular system. I think Mahomes seems to be just that good that it didn't really matter what system he played in. That you've seen the way he's played in the NFL thus far, and it seems very natural to him to play the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm just on my phone doing some research. We took, how about this? Njoku with our 29th pick. Next person up was TJ Watt.
That's not great.
Yeah, and then 25th pick, we took Jabril Peppers, was part of the Odell deal. We need him now. Simple as that. And the next person up was McKinley.
Falcons. Yeah, he went Falcons, yeah.
And the next one after that is Tre'Davious White of the Bills, quarterback.
Yeah, it's when you look at that draft, it was a very productive draft that year. Like, I try and convince a lot of Bears fans that Mitch was really our 4th round pick and Eddie Jackson was our 1st round pick. That would have been a bit better, because I think that year we got, I think it was Mitch and was it Anthony Miller the year after? Maybe. But then we got Tariq Cohen and Eddie Jackson in the 4th round. So maybe we should have just used them as our real 1st round picks and just try and convince ourselves that Mitch was our 4th round pick instead. That would have been a lot better. But yeah, to kind of end the conversation here, next week's also a pretty tough one when you look at how good the Las Vegas Raiders have been playing and how weird it is to say the Las Vegas Raiders instead of Oakland. But they had a good start against Tampa Bay this week. But again, Tom Brady was on form and he was dealing for most of the game. How well do you think Cleveland matches up against Las Vegas last week? I don't know what the situation is, because I know this week they lost basically their whole O-line because they broke COVID protocols and that they had to self-isolate. But I don't know if that continues next week. But how well do you think Cleveland matches up to Las Vegas for the upcoming week?
Raiders are a surprise package. They could easily be in the playoffs this year. And it'd be great for, what's he called? The draft guy, Mayock.
Oh, yeah, Mike Mayock.
Yeah, it'd be great for him because, you know, he did a few random things and, you know, he backs himself as a draft expert. So now he's got the chance. And, yeah. But yeah, I think, you know, what team plays on Sunday, a full strength Raiders beats the Browns.
Yeah.
But if they put a weak Raiders team out, I believe our running game could really hurt them. And maybe some confidence from Baker Mayfield. He could really grow on what happened in the last game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the keys is probably going to be that if the Browns can run the ball and kind of keep the offense for the Raiders off the field as much as possible, limit kind of the time possession. I think that's one way for the Browns to kind of hit at them, because you look at where they've had success and you see the running game and also on the run defense. If you're able to stop the run, and then they're going to have to try and do something with the passing game, because that's one part that the Raiders have been very successful at this season. You've seen some of their kind of young players that have come through the draft this season that have been excellent. With Henry Ruggs, he's been kind of like their Tyreek Hill style player that you've seen that the Raiders wanted to bring in. They've wanted to increase the speed on that team, and I think they've done that considerably over the last 2 seasons. So it's going to be I think it'll be a very interesting game, because you have two kind of younger teams that are ready to kind of go at it. Both teams pretty good when healthy in the trenches. It would be interesting if the Raiders offensive line is back. It was a weird story that kind of leaked during the week that the whole offensive line was going to be missing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But again, I guess that just shows just how important some of these teams need to treat these COVID protocols, because if not, then you're basically guaranteeing that you're going to lose a game, because I don't think any team can get through a season or even a week where you're losing your entire offensive line. And it's something that I think they are going to have to clean up if they're to kind of, like you said, they should be in or around getting into the playoffs. If they want to do that, they need to make sure that they're kind of on the straight and narrow in terms of all the COVID protocols that the NFL has put in place to try and protect all the players.
I've got one last question before I shoot off.
Yeah.
Montgomery going to get a touchdown tonight. He's my last player. I need 8 points from him tonight. Is he going to get it for me?
My kind of question for you is it regular or is it PPR?
I think it's PPR.
You might be okay, because again, I see it's going to be very tough, because I think it's going to be a lower scoring game like the last 2 seasons where the two defenses have kind of dominated up front. I could see it being where he might get some of his action in the kind of the quick passing game. The problem with the Bears, just the offensive line hasn't gotten enough push for Montgomery. I think where you might get lucky is if the Bears are winning, coming into the third or fourth quarter, they might decide to start running the ball. I haven't seen too much of that this season, so it's hard. I think you have a better chance now that it's PPR. You might get lucky in terms of if they get a couple big plays and just have to run it in, but I wouldn't be too confident in the Bears running game, especially against the Rams. But yeah, it's hopefully for both your fantasy team and my team that he's able to get over the line and score a touchdown or two tonight, and hopefully get us to 6-1 and kind of maintain our lead at the top of the NFC North. That would be very good. But yeah, hopefully that happens tonight anyway. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for joining me today, Paul. I really appreciate you coming on. It's good to get to talk about kind of some of the other teams. I don't get to do it as often because a lot of people want to kind of hear about Bears and all the stuff in the NFC North, but it's good to be able to kind of talk about even some of the teams in the AFC and kind of learn about more of the teams in more depth, where we would hear kind of what I'd say the national guys kind of say about the teams, but it's good to get a fan's perspective. And I really appreciate you coming on today.
Nah, really nice talking to you, buddy. And
yeah, you too.
And yeah, thanks a lot for tonight. And go Browns. I'm going with we're gonna squeeze in the playoffs, but we're Brownsy mess it up, or we'll go to the Super Bowl and no Browns fans can go and watch it. That'd be the classic.
Yeah, that would be what I would say be classic Bears as well, where we finally get over our hump to get to a Super Bowl and nobody would be allowed to go. But hopefully by that time fans can maybe see it, or even that regardless if there's no fans, if the Bears can make the Super Bowl, I'd be delighted. Hopefully it can be Bears versus Browns one day. That would be good. All right, thanks for today, Paul. It's been really good having you on.
Take care, buddy. Go Brown.
You too.